No. Okay. So, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us for this first annual Symposium of Islamic Art and Architecture. The symposium is organized by the Department of Architecture and Interior Design and Cultural Collaboration Committee from the University of Bahrain. It will be a week-long event, including lecture series, panel discussion, virtual exhibition, and design competition that was already launched yesterday. Now I would like to welcome today's presenters that will open the first series of lectures under the theme of Symbolism in Islamic Art and Architecture. Today we have 4 distinguished presenters with some very interesting topics, and all of them are from Department of Architecture and Interior Design, University of Bahrain. First presenter is Mrs. Ayesha Agha Shah. Mrs. Shah teaches at the Department of Architecture and Interior Design, University of Bahrain since February 2012. She previously worked as a lecturer of architecture and research fellow of heritage field at the NED University of Engineering and Technology, Pakistan. She was also involved in Karachi Heritage Building Resurvey project for 5 years. Mrs. Ayesha gained her master's degree in historic building conservation at University of Portsmouth, UK. While teaching at the University of Bahrain, she also focused her attention in teaching design fundamentals, architecture design, building conservation, and history. Due to her passion in conservation and heritage, she is always engaged with various research projects related to cultural heritage. Now I would like to invite Mrs. Ayesha Agha to present and start with her presentation. Thank you very much, Mrs. Ayesha.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Leila, for my wonderful introduction, and welcome everyone who is here and who have joined us in this wonderful event. And we are really looking forward to have this whole symposium, a very successful one with your collaboration, with your coordination. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. I hope it is okay. Sorry. I hope it is clear, right? You all can see my screen.
Yes, Mrs. Ayesha, we can see your screen.
Okay, just a minute. Oh, something is happening in my computer. Just a minute. Okay, so my screen is visible, right?
Yes, Mrs. Ayesha, we can see your screen.
Okay, thank you very much. So as we all know that this event is to celebrate and acknowledge Islamic art and architecture, and we really have this privilege to start this first symposium on the platform of University of Bahrain. And today I will be talking about a very interesting topic, which is symbolism and geometry in mosque design. So basically we will be discussing about the basic symbolism and geometry, and it has a very strong relationship of our belief and how then it is transforming or linking with our art and architecture in the Islamic world. So as we all know that understanding geometry is an integral part of Islamic art and architecture, especially when we know that we are not allowed to relate our art with the living organism. So we know that I would like to start this presentation especially with a very beautiful verse taken from Quran. And it says that we have beautified the lower sky with lamps. So I really would like you to just hold a minute and read it and think that what is this word, what is this sentence is giving you, what type of sign or symbolism. I would like you to read and just think for a few seconds. So when we read this belief, I'm sure that you all are having good ideas or good imagination when you're reading this beautiful line from the Quran. So when we also continue that how we start thinking about the symbolism. So it's a very basic concept that when we read, there are many places in Quran which shows some symbolism, which can enhance our imagination, which can actually encourage us to think more and more, to see unseen things which are not appearing. So when we read this beautiful word that we have beautified the lower sky with lamps, it symbolizes that the stars on the sky, and this is not only during the night but even during the day, the beautiful appearance of the light through the sun, and at night the beautiful appearance of light through the sky stars is actually symbolizes the beauty of light in Quran, or the beauty of light in Islam. So I think I thought that it will be a very good and interesting way of introducing my lecture about the symbolism in Islamic art and architecture by using this phrase from Quran. So when we're talking about Islamic symbolism or Islamic architecture, we know that our religion is actually monotheistic belief, where we can say that there is no creator but Allah. This is our belief, and this belief has a very strong relationship with the symbolism of art and architecture in Islamic world. So it can be also said that symbolic seeing or superficially seeing of existence is one of the first differences in the area of human thoughts, the main principle of prophet messages and their common speech, and inviting humans to see the hidden inner aspect of world beyond the external and superficial aspect of the world. This is what we have learned or we read from Quran and Hadith. So scientifically also, they had shared ideas about symbol at two different levels. One is being symbolic of existence, such as pure truth and reality achieved by reasoning. And we have seen that how Islamic scholars have already participated in history and defined this scientific reason behind symbolism. The other idea of this symbolism is one way of transferring of meaning from one area to another area. This is how we can transfer, or we can relate one thing with another thing. So with this basic understanding of Islamic symbolism or symbolism as a general, we know we just symbolizes things in art and architecture. We believe that there is only one God, and we say that the God is appearing in a very simple form, and all our beauty, our composition, creation of materialistic thing in the world, physically or metaphorically, is actually excluded from that. And as we know that Islam is generally considered an iconoclastic religion in which the representation of living things has been prohibited from its very beginning. That is actually the main reason where we can see the geometrical introduction and the enhancement and the advancement of the geometry in Islamic art and architecture. So these beliefs, these restrictions are actually the main reason to start the symbolism and geometry in Islamic art and architecture. So when we see symbolism in Islamic architecture, we can see that there are some things which can be very intangible, but still we can symbolize those things in our tangible world. And also we can see some very materialistic objects. For example, in some objects we use in Islamic architecture, such as minaret, dome. So those objects are also giving some kind of symbolic meanings of intangibility in the space. So we can see how intangible aspect of Islamic ideas. For example, we can see about light, we can see about air, how it is relating with the tangible, qualities of the spaces, and how tangible aspects or tangible material or objects are actually taking us with the symbolism of unseen things or intangible aspect of the art. So we can say that, in Islam, light symbolizes God, and we say that God is light and of the heavens and of the earth. So everywhere what we see, I mean, we see our God. So this is because of this belief, we can see the role of light in Islamic architecture. It is symbolically representing the presence of God in spaces. So when we design an Islamic building, there is a very important role of light, as you can see in these images, that how the light is actually penetrating in the solid masses and how it is bringing a sense of spirituality in the space. Then we can see another symbol of color, which is actually defined by glory, or which is also representing beauty. So that was also playing a very important role, or symbolizes some very important messages, which belongs to our sense of spirituality. For example, in many places, we have seen the use of color turquoise, which is very common in Islamic religion, or the use of green or a use of blue. They symbolizes in different meanings in the spaces. This topic is actually a very extensive topic, and it is really very difficult to explain each and every part of the presentation in a very short span of 20 to 25 minutes. But I will try my best to at least give you some idea, or just to go with you to have a very beautiful journey of symbolism of Islamic art and architecture. We can also see that water symbolizes with the holiness, purity, transparency in Islamic architecture or Islamic art. And we have seen that in a lot of buildings, architects or scholars, they have actually used water to define some kind of, religious beliefs. And as we say that the purification, so we know that the source of living things and purification, we define or we can symbolize this with the water. And you will see a lot of examples in mosque architecture or in different, Mughal period palaces, where they are also relating it with the ablution spaces, also with the paradise, symbolism. Another very interesting part of Islamic architecture symbolism is gardens, which also symbolizes the paradise view or imagination, which in many places defined in Quran. So we can see that external purification, and it's actually described with that. And we also say that, especially if you look at this concept of Chahar Bagh, which is one of the very important Islamic architecture landscape concept, which defines that the four stream of water channel is actually representing the paradise of Eden, in the Islamic world. So with those very basic ideas of Islamic symbolism in architecture, there are three main characteristics of Islamic art. And this is actually my main focus of the presentation, that how we will see those symbolism or those understanding with the art and architecture. So basically those three characteristics are including floral designs, which actually, because of this belief in Islamic aniconism, that flower designs were used by artists in the place of human or animal form as Islamic art patterns. These floral motifs seen in Islamic ceramics, carpet style, and you can also see that in most of the Islamic building, they try to use maybe sometimes in the murals or in different, pattern on the wall treatment. Likewise, another very interesting character of Islamic art is Islamic calligraphy. So this is perhaps one of the Islamic art characteristics that link to the Quran. Calligraphy is actually a very direct, connection with the Quranic verses into the Islamic art. So we can see this is the most direct application of understanding or transferring Islamic beliefs into the artistic form. Last but not the least is actually a role of Islamic geometry, and we can see that the combination of squares and circle or any other basic shapes, form that intricate patterns on various mediums in different application in art and architecture. So today's lecture is more focusing about the Islamic geometry and its symbolism in the Islamic architecture. Inshallah, next time when we will have this next year, we will try to focus more in the other aspect of Islamic art characters. So basically, when we talk about geometry, it is actually a very calculative measurements of mathematical orders and geometrical proportion in the form of art. And we also know that it's not really new. I mean, this concept was already introduced even from the from the Greek time, when they learn about the proportions, and their belief was that the beauty lies in the proportion. So we have such examples where we can understand the significance of geometry in art and architecture. So we can see that how a shape is the outer form of an object or figure, such as a circle, triangle, square, and or any other polygon, which can really play a very important role in the art. And we can see, and we will see now, that how with the basic idea of geometry is actually developed more in the Islamic art. So the main concept of geometry, it is a very good saying that the whole world is composed in conformity with arithmetical, geometrical, and musical relationship. That is a very beautiful saying where you can see the relationship of maths, geometry, and music, that how proportion, rhythm, and harmony is actually relate these things with the artistic expression. So the world resembles the unique system of a single man or a city, which shows also the unity of its maker. So we can see that how with the combination of different elements, different shapes, different calculation can bring a very united composition, which can perhaps define the universe. You can see here in this screen that there are different simplification and the complexity of basic geometrical element, right, starting from the very basic shape of either square or triangle. And we can see how by adding more complexity you can develop this geometry in the design. It also again depends on the beliefs, on the concept, that how you are involved with the geometrical or religious belief, that or how you're thinking about your religion or your conceptual belief and applying in the geometrical understanding. So there are very good research people have done about the Islamic geometry evaluation, and we have seen then with the geometrical understanding and development, numbers are playing a very important role. So we can relate numbers directly with the sides of geometrical shapes. Perhaps as our main focus of this lecture is talking about symbolization and geometrical development. So in our religion, we can also see that numbers play a very important role, and this role is actually can be seen in many art expressions. We will see in more further slides that how these numbers are actually related with different conceptual meanings. So we can also see the meaning of numbers in the Islam is similar with Pythagorean system, in which numbers are both quantitative and qualitative. So again, it is very calculative, it is very in order. So numbers are not defined solely by addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. You will see some further overlapping of these numbers when we see more complex geometrical pattern in Islamic art expression. So I really found very interesting research study which was done by Islamic Azad University in Azerbaijan in Iran. In Ajabshir in Iran. So they really did some kind of a study that how numbers are symbolizing with different conceptual belief. I would just like to discuss very few. Of course, this is very extensive research, and if someone is interesting, I would like to share the link, and I think I have mentioned the link somewhere, so you can go in detail. For example, if we are starting with a very basic and first number, which is actually 0, so which is symbolizes the cosmos, and which is again symbolizes the enlightenment and the perfection of the shape and the perfection of any concept. So you can see that how we are relating numbers with the shapes and with the symbolism in its meaning. So when we talk about number 1, we all know that 1 symbolizes Wahid. We know that our God, there is only one God, so it is a very strong meaning with that. Likewise, when you go further, when we talk about 2, it is symbolizing with the beginning it is symbolizing the balance, where you have some kind of stillness in the space. Likewise, there are different variations of different number. For example, 3 symbolizes a polygon and also a space where you can find a center position. So again, you can see that how with a very simple shape, the expression in architecture is actually developed, in terms of different buildings. And likewise, we can see number 4, a most perfect shape, and you can see it shows the integrity of the earth. And we can see likewise there are different pentagon, hexagon, and 8-sided shapes or 12-sided shapes. So the reason why I included this research in this presentation, it also emphasizing that how numbers are actually helping us to develop geometrical shapes, and how those numbers and sides of the geometrical shapes are helping us to symbolize intangible sense of the meaning of what we are trying to achieve. So when we talk about the primary shapes in geometry, we can see that how basic shapes are actually, by using its mathematical calculation, by repetition, by alteration, can help to produce geometrical pattern. So the equilateral triangle and the hexagon and the square are the 3 primary shapes which will independently fill a surface without leaving any gaps. So you can see how the multiplication of these basic shapes are actually connecting adjacent to each other and creating very interesting forms or very interesting shape. And this 2D transformation with basic shapes leads us to develop more complexity when we move further into 3D forms. One very important aspect, especially when we are talking about the geometrical pattern, is the role of grid. And the role of grid in Islamic geometry or in any geometry, it is very important. Actually, it is a main approach which help you to develop your path in the pattern. So these are the basic development of the shape based on some regular and semi-regular geometry, which can make it more dynamic. As much as you use multi-layers of grid or semi-regular grids, you will see more complexity, more dynamism in the geometrical shapes. And then you can see that how these imagination of our ideas or symbolism is actually with the help of geometry is coming into the images, and how with the development of images we are actually bringing these beautiful application in interior or architecture designs. This is one such example where you can see the role of 2D development with the help of grid, with the help of basic shapes, how it is applied in a beautiful artistic expression of one door. So this with this symposium, we have already introduced a very interesting design competition about a mosque, about a neighborhood mosque. And we believe that when we are talking about Islamic symbolism, it has a very important role in mosque architecture development. So mosque is a sacred building used by Muslims for a prayer. So we know that this is a place for worship, and it has different important components which are necessary to be there when we are designing a mosque. So these are certain elements of a mosque, as you can see, mihrab. As you can see that there is member. You can also relate those elements in the picture. It is shown, and particularly this information is very important for those students who are participating in the mosque design competition. Then we can see minaret, ablution fountain or ablution area. Now these are very basic. However, they are according to different historical development and different regional expressions or different regional influence. We have more elements attached with the mosque architecture, which we will see in some other examples in the building design. So we know that when we are talking about architecture or interior design part, it is actually a very functional design approach. So when we talk about the function of Islamic art, and we believe that when we are designing with the Islamic ideology, when we are designing with the Islamic concepts, any building, it take our mind to the intelligible world to dissolve everyday experience of things. So this is a very beautiful thing, and this particular image which is appearing in front of you, it is taken from the Shah Mosque, which was constructed in the 17th century. So you can see that how beautiful way of using geometrical symbols and colors in Islamic art, which can take you from the physical world to the outer world. So these minarets or these elements which you can see also symbolizes, as I was telling you in the beginning, there are some very tangible elements in art and architecture which gives us symbolic meaning of their intangible sense of spirituality. For example, when we are talking about minaret. So these tall towers which is actually used to call to prayer, where you can even hear the prayer from distance. The call to prayer begins with Allahu Akbar, meaning Allah is the greatest. So we can see that how this tall tower is actually recognizing that the power, the individuality, or the attraction in the space, if you can see that there is nothing in the surrounding. And also we can see it is a notion of fire and light. Again, light, fire, we can see that it is kind of attraction to someone to come to the place. And it also symbolizes with the spiritual illumination. Then we have another element which is actually portal, and we know that it is the impression of passing into the another world. So when we are thinking about mosque spaces, especially when we are talking about symbolism, so we see that in mosque architecture, there are different thresholds which are actually symbolizes from the outer world to the inner world. For example, when you're entering to the mosque, you're entering from the realistic world to some kind of spiritual world. And with each threshold, whether you are moving from open space to semi-open space, and from semi-space to a closed space through the portal, which is taking you away from the materialistic world. Then again, we can see that how other elements of a mosque design symbolizes in different ways. This is, you can see example of a mihrab, which is recessed wall facing towards the Mecca. And you can see that how these are converting or diverting our attention towards the one direction. And then we can see a Arabic example of decoration, and we can see how geometry has become part of the Arabesque art and architecture, and we have seen more examples with that. I think I'm taking more time, so I will be more fast.
Ayesha, can you hear me, please?
Yes.
Please, just, I don't know how many more slides, but can you just finish it in about 1 minute, please?
1 minute? Okay. So because this is just how...
an hour now.
I'm sorry, I really did not realize the time. So this is, and I would like to end that how we can see those images manifestation in the real example. So this is very quickly. I would like to take only 5 minutes. You can see that how images are actually developing in geometry, and how this geometrical development we can see in architecture design. We can see how scale and proportion are actually relating with plan and elevation, and how in 3D, even in interior detailing, we are actually taking inspiration from this grid and geometrical basis. You can see the elevation of that developed mosque. This is the mosque in Lahore, this example, and you can see how the building interior with Islamic architecture characters, which we have discussed in the beginning, floral pattern, calligraphy, and geometrical application. This is the outdoor view. Again, this is one of the interior view in detail, and this is how you can develop your understanding before the construction in 3D form, and then how you will see finally in the architecture building. Likewise, at the end, I just added few examples of contemporary mosque, which is the inspiration of the design theme of the mosque competition. So you can see that geometry is still being used with this proportion, with its grid understanding, even in the contemporary mosque design. Thank you very much if I have taken a bit more time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ayesha, so much. It was a very interesting presentation. I wish we have more time to listen to you. However, we need to move to our second presenter. Our second presenter is Dr. Tamadher Alfahal, designer, TEDx speaker, and curator from Bahrain, with practice extending from curating community art projects to art installations. Her areas of interest are cultural identity, design culture, art collaboration, and the creative process. In 2010, she was a member of the research team of Bahrain's International Pavilion at Venice Architectural Biennale. She obtained her master's degree in interior design in 2010 and completed her PhD in 2019, both from Birmingham City University in UK. In her doctoral research, Dr. Tamadher investigates the possible philosophical approaches in contemporary Islamic design studies. Her academic approach involves viewing curatorial practice as a disruptive form of knowledge that can include the structure and the visual experience of the written thesis. Dr. Tamadher, back to you.
Hi, Mrs. Leila. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining. Let me just start sharing my screen and let's get it started. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. So thank you everyone for joining the talk. So today I'm going to share one of my favorite and most humbling experience in my academic journey. Just to give you an idea of what my doctoral research was about, I was looking at the philosophy of Islamic designs, its hidden meanings and process, and try to trace it or reconcile it with the contemporary practice of Islam world today. In addition, I didn't want to become only about my own experience. I wanted my research to reflect a collective voice rather than an individual one, and a collective voice that would go throughout the process. So for a designer, it can be challenging to get stuck in literature and not being out there in the open and work with your own hands. So hence my research was mainly tailored as practice-led research from the very beginning. That way I wouldn't get bored as well, because I'm all over the place. So my first challenge was in the research was investigating the notion of creativity in traditional Islamic philosophy. So what does it mean to be creative, on how Islam as a religion, and not only as a religion, but also as a social conduct, as a personal conduct, and as a way of life, view creativity. So I had to dive into different kind of literature. Some of it actually literature that was written in Old Arabic, so I could barely understand half of it, and literature that can only be found in English language about something that is Arabic or about Islamic philosophy. So I have spent some good time, like few months or almost a year, just reading into Ibn Arabi, Ikhwan al-Safa, joining Sufi sessions with people who read about Ibn Arabi or Ibn Arabi's reading group, just trying to understand how Islam defines the notion of creativity and how also it defines the act of making or creating. So basically, for a visual person like myself, it was very hard and very challenging, but I only could comprehend it fully when I actually started visualizing my literature review. So as you can see, I started with visual diary to understand my research findings, and I moved to creating collages, art pieces, diagrams, trying to use the visual language instead of textual language to embody the research process. I also went back to even drawing geometry with my own hand manually in an attempt to be immersed in the flow. And this kind of notion is a notion that's known in creativity that refers to being in a state of like a resulting state or an immersive state from the divine supreme. So I was thinking maybe God would work through me. I also had to map out my process in a way that pays tribute to the flexible, dynamic process of research in art and design in particular. We as people we are as researchers in art and design, or artists or designers, we think differently. And just like going back and forth in a London underground, so was my research exploration. It was also important to me to actually know who are the people in the field who are hopping on and off in the same topic. And guess what? I actually mapped them too. So I wanted to find connections between scholars, architects, designers who constantly challenge and inform the landscape of Islamic production of knowledge. It's a collective landscape, and I'm not working on my own. There is a whole big wide web that people working on. And this way can actually also, I mean, this is a side note, is that using map and using visual language was also making the research more accessible to people. So rather than reading one thick thesis, people can actually read maps, read visuals, and can understand what the research was about. In any way, back to the map. So part of the map actually included craftsmen. So in a world that's actually more oriented towards technology and it's more oriented towards 3D printing, when and how do craftsmen work, or where do they fit within the contemporary landscape of Islamic art and architecture? So what is the importance of sustaining traditional craftsmanship in our contemporary creative settings? Is it important for me as a designer, or maybe as a teacher or design educator, to actually connect to traditional craftsmen? So this is when I applied for an art residency in Morocco, and I got accepted, and getting all excited and joining this wonderful experience in this beautiful city, Tétouan, which is in Morocco, in the north side of Morocco. I remember actually my supervisor telling me something just before I go. She told me that I need to undress my educatedness. And going there, like even when dealing with the master artisans, and going there with a complete blank canvas. So not me as a teacher or as a researcher, but there I was there as an apprentice. I was learning from my muallims and also collaborating with them at times. So I wanted to know mainly when I went there, how do they define creativity for a traditional craftsman who keep doing his job for some years, like it's a lifetime career, usually in mosques of Morocco, and they also pass it to their sons and pass it through generations to sustain it. So how do they view it? How do they view the act of creativity? Do they actually feel something specific, like when they are in the zone or in the process of making things? So while I was learning from them, I was also chatting with them, and I was known as the Bahrainiya, or the Bahraini girl, and it was such an amazing experience, something that I could not learn from books, I could not learn from references. It also relates to the question that I had regarding the importance of tacit knowledge and craftsmanship being associated with the act of making. So it explored this relationship between thinking and creating. So what do they think and while they're creating, which is a very essential part of the creative process, as we all know. I've noticed that the leather embossed Mu'allim moves and talks completely different from the Mu'allim who is specialized in plaster or specialized in carving or wooden inlay. They even embody the tools, embody the thing that they're actually working on. They're embodying their experience through themselves as well. This also relates to the question that I had regarding the importance of tacit knowledge and craftsmanship being associated with the art of making. And this actually relates to one of the things that I've read, which is The Thinking Hand by Yohani Belasma. And he was actually talking a lot about the tacit knowledge and how actually our hands behold a memory within themselves, a knowledge that cannot be taught through books. It only can be taught through practice, through tacit experience, and getting your hands dirty, so to speak. So one of the experiences, as you can see over here, is the experience of creating a zilij, which is the tiles in Morocco, the famous tiles technique in Morocco. And it was a tiny little thing that they gave us to actually create. And what's interesting about it is when you see the whole factory or the whole workshop or atelier in Morocco, is that a big team, but they're working as one. You have one person who is cutting a specific motif shape with a specific color, and then another person actually cutting another color or another motif. So they would cut it and then they would assemble it in bags, very simple bags. And then what they actually do, as you can see in the middle picture, they assemble the whole thing in reverse. So I don't even see the colors when I'm creating the zilij. They would actually do it so perfectly, and they would imagine that they would do like large pallets, so 1 to 2 meters, panels, and they're all in reverse. I don't see even the colors. And imagine just one big mistake, one tiny mistake, and then I would actually see it after I would, put the plaster on at the back. So for me, it was already stressful to actually work on this tiny little thing, trying to perfect it, and then waiting for the craftsman to help me pour the base of it, which is at the back as well. And it is like a sort of a concrete base. And then when you flip it, you would see the final piece being assembled and being stuck together. And of course, like they were just working together, just like I said, as one person. It's just a very systematic sort of process. So that was very, very interesting. And in other days as well, when I don't have my lessons with the mu'allims, I also was wondering or was thinking, what about the people who are studying art and design in Morocco, who are into art or who are into crafts, or maybe the young designers, the design students? do they actually sustain this craftsmanship, or do they think of it as one important part of the design process, or like the contemporary design thinking when it comes to contemporary Islamic art and architecture? So what I did is that I conducted collaborative sessions. So I asked educators, I asked students, and I actually started asking them, inviting them to do a brainstorming session, and in a studio setting where I had my residency. And it was the idea that maybe we would provoke some question, and maybe we can brainstorm some ideas, and then, you know, coming up with maybe prototypes on how to articulate new thoughts, or articulate their own ideas about these questions. So the aim was also maybe we would end up in prototyping ideas and new possibilities. So this is me trying to summarize the brainstorming sessions. So I asked them two main things. So those artists, designers, and students, I tried to address two main questions mentioned, which was how to create spiritual space, or what makes a space spiritual, and what makes art Islamic. So that was me in my studio, trying to put it all together into one big, large map. So as you can see, it started with like very obvious answers, and then we went deeper and deeper, asking why each time, to branch the brainstorming out. Basically, what I had in mind as something that looks like this, very simple: exploration, ideation, experimenting, and then developing something. And it was something from the very beginning of my research that I wanted to do, is to collaborate and to see what people think about it, ending up only in that residency to be something as complex as this. So different kind of stages, different kind of roles, different kind of people. So besides the participants that I was brainstorming with, I also was the artist, the apprentice, the researcher, as well as the designer. So how can you communicate all of that? Like, how would I summarize my experience within this whole complex web of things and new ideas that I was absorbing? Usually at the end of residencies, they curate an exhibition where all the residents or artists and residents actually put their work during that time and exhibit what they have done so far and during that time of the residency. And for me, it was very difficult. Like, what would I do and what do I choose? I have different roles. So what I did is that I curated my own space. I had my studio as the gallery, and in each corner it was one role of that I took. So it pays tribute to the process, to the complexity of the process. It allows the viewers to be engaged. I also left the desk open and had some pictures and sketches and tools so that they can actually add to the conversation, and therefore disseminating the research knowledge throughout the research and not just by the end of the research. I also wanted to show how people come up, and wanted to show the collaborations that I did with the artisans or the muallims. So on the left, as you can see, there is a plate and there is a wooden piece with my own design. And I actually went to different kind of muallims to actually ask how to implement it. And this is something that maybe relates to us as designers, or even as design educators, or maybe as for our design students, is that when we design something, we are in a team. We need to kind of outsource or collaborate with people with different kind of skills who actually facilitate things for us, help us in producing what we have in mind. So that was a hands-on experience. So all fed into one thing. It all fed into one research narrative, from the literature finding to the reflexive process to the ideation of thoughts, all fed into one research narrative that was set in there. There was also something very important in the experience is the muallims themselves. That was one of the main things that I've learned. It's like the importance of tacit knowledge and the importance of reconnecting with them as people. So they were the narrative that I was seeking. They were the knowledge that I didn't have in books or references. And that way it actually gave a diverse voice rather than an individual one. It also made me realize that, for example, the things that Yohani Belazma was saying about embodied knowledge is also embedded in the design philosophy in a way. So I have, for example, Ma'allim Abdul Jalil, the first guy you see on the left. He's a plaster Ma'allim, and he was in a way like they actually also came to the exhibition, and he was in a way looking at the work and saying that this is exactly what they had in mind, or what he had in mind, but he didn't know how to articulate it. Ma'allim Abdul Salam, which is the next guy, who's the wooden inlaid Ma'allim, there was an interesting story behind it, and it was very moving for me. Is that one of his apprentices, or one of the Ma'allims working with him, he couldn't talk, he couldn't speak, and he couldn't listen as well. And he just saw me being there and all excited and trying to learn how to inlay the wood. He actually came to me, and I don't know if you can see me in the video. I don't know if the PR can actually switch to my video. As basically what he did is that without even talking, he was just showing me his work. I don't know if you can see it, it's very tiny over here. He showed me the inlaid work. He was cleaning, and he was just telling me that just pointing at his hands and doing movements, articulating that it is such a hard work, but it's such a beautiful thing when you see it at the end. And without even doing anything, without even using words, using his own hand as a language, he actually articulated his process. So that was very an insightful kind of moment for me. Also, Ma'allim Ali, who is the specialized in ceramic, is the guy who I actually wanted to create like a plate with my own design for it, and he actually helped me out choosing the brushes, choosing what kind of color fits, and so on. So the techniques, the tools, is something that is he would take it for granted, but it is something that you need to learn step by step if you are someone coming as a blank canvas like myself. Ma'allim Ayesha, which is the last one on the right, he is the leather embossed Ma'allim, and it is the Ma'allim who was allocated for me to learn from him the most. So during the residency, I was allocated with him, and it was specified with different lessons that I took with him. But being so excited in Morocco, I actually couldn't resist but learning from all of them. The one thing that I also want to mention, which is how is it related to Islamic philosophy, besides the idea of the tacit knowledge, is that there was a notion in Quran, which is a Quranic verse that says, the hand of God is above their hand. And when you look at it in the context or in the historical context of the Quran, it relates to a specific incident in the life of the Prophet. However, when you look at it from a philosophical point of view, it actually relates artistically to being immersed in the flow, as if those ma'allims or the craftsmen become the hand of God flowing through them, like the creativity flows through them, so they become the tools, and they become in one or in unison with the tools that they're using. So that was something that I've even witnessed as a first user or as someone, as an observer who is there looking at them as well. So that's basically a summary of my experience, and that's all for me now. I hope I didn't take much of time of my session, and at the end I'm telling you shukran bizaf. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Tamadher, very much for your really interesting presentation. I feel a little bit jealous, to be honest with you, that you passed through this experience. So I envy you from that side. So very interesting. Now we will go to the next presenter, to Dr. Nihal Almerbati. Coming from a background in interior design and an interest in the link between people, culture, gender, and religion, Dr. Nihal researchers seek to bridge the gap between the material and immaterial interior products in Middle Eastern dwellings. In 2007, she graduated with honors from the BSc in Interior Design, University of Bahrain. In 2009, she completed her master's degree with distinction from the University for the Creative Arts in the UK. And in 2016, Dr. Almerbati completed her PhD in the Design School at the Manfort University, UK. Her PhD investigates hybrid heritage and the reproduction of mashrabiyah, to be revived using new technologies like 3D printing. Her research interests, conference papers, and the international publication are in the field of sustainable heritage and smart interiors, modes of production and digital crafts, as well as customization via additive manufacturing and 3D printing. Dr. Nihal co-founded UOB Digital Fabrication Workshop and the Smart Sustainable Urbanism Lab. Dr. Nihal, your time.
Thank you, and shukran bizaf, Ms. Leila, and the previous amazing speakers. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers for inviting me and having me in part of this. I am sharing my screen. If you can confirm, Mrs. Leila, that I am presenting at the moment.
Yes, we can see your screen, but yes, now it's better. We can see the full screen. Yes.
Great, thank you so much. So yes, thank you for reading out a bit of history, I would say. Today I want to take you into another direction, into cinemas and movies and popcorn in the background of all of this, but also a lot of to do with inspired Islamic art from cinema and from filmmaking. So this lecture is focusing on several questions. Basically, I will be answering how can documentary films and Muslims' historical episodes be used to inspire Islamic art. I'll let you also have an answer to what can be portrayed out of filmmaking and scene settings, how feelings and contexts can inspire art messages and meanings, and also what tools and outcomes can be expected from design students and artists, as well as how can this relate to Islamic art within the 21st century. So I would like to start by saying that the film industry, the documentaries of movies, whether in the Muslim world or in the entire world, has been a growing industry. A lot of reflection of our physical actions, real settings, architecture, and real characters' feelings, reflection of a period of history and linked to narrative. To basically some very important chronicle accidents. So let us just watch 1 minute of this intro and then start. So by viewing this clip, you can actually see and feel that Islamic art in the background of all of these scenes are much richer than what you can expect. Actually, within the film industry, you see three major elements. If you want to triangulate them, you will see the human here acting as the character, and you will see the meanings that the director wants to send, and also the comprehension, which is a deeper amount of learning that is happening to the viewer of this scene. He will be actually immersed in a process of learning that go beyond just the story or the scenario that the humans have acted. Actually, you will have a sort of a mediation between the physical world and a mental world. When in the physical world, you will have physical objects that is seen in the context or in the background of the film, and you will also see the mental world, where you will have the sensory motor system being very active, and a model symbol system, as well as the cognitive system that acts in the very back of your mind. In analyzing the scenes or the films, we have actually the physical world, as I said, that is portrayed in architecture, the scenery, the natural phenomena that is happening, all of the background of this documentary or movie or series that you're watching. You'll also have the textile and patterns that are designed, perhaps customized specifically for these actors, as well as the personas themselves of the characters and the cultural details. That is all part of the film industry. For the viewer point of view, you have a mental world. After watching the series, you will be sensing the space. You will be sensing all these beautiful patterns and crafts that Ms. Ayesha and Dr. Tamadher have already explained, but you will sense them in scale and time and use. You will be able to relate them to special narratives, feelings, and also analysis of texture and textile with the geometry of them and in terms of shape of Islamic patterns shape. What would the two worlds, the physical and mental world, create? They will create some sort of an imaginative world where you'll have new space details. Your mind will be able to visualize the space, the time constraints, and will be telling the feelings. They will be able to connect feelings together and imagine patterns, textiles as well. This would enrich the artistic reflection. You will have abstract colors in the settings. You will be able to reflect feelings in your own generated geometry or art pieces. And you will also be able to use the visual traces to memories as well as conceptual metaphors to create what we can say as a cinema-inspired art or design. So why the filmmaking scene can be very beneficial for art students, architecture or design? Because unlike still art, Islamic still art is flat fashion. There is fashion, hence there are a bit of colors that are from the realistic scenarios. In film scenes, you'll see the full 3D shape of whether it's an architectural space or an interior space. You would be sensing the context, the noises, perhaps even the smells out of what is happening and what is said in the space. You will have an immersive state, immersive emotions and feelings. You might tear, you might feel betrayed, you might feel the loss of someone, you might even feel the revenge of a certain character towards another. And these feelings can generate a lot of positive vibes towards art later on. You would actually, I would claim, to be immersed in a full culture that a good director will demonstrate in a film. So looking at this, again, comparing still art showing some Islamic arts and designs or patterns to film scenes, you would see that a lot of what you see on the left-hand side is more static. One way, you would see the pattern, but you would not see how these patterns perhaps are touched or felt. In the right, you would see it from both directions. You'll see a lot of colors. You'll see it on the furniture. The camera would zoom into different angles, so you can actually visualize the pattern with the embrace of light. You would also have another layer of music at the background, so that would all play a role in your absorbing the details of this culture and this space and this context. Here is an analysis of what my student did in analyzing one of the series. Here they have analyzed Kusum, which is a very famous Ottoman Empire queen, I would say, and within their analysis, the patterns that they've seen in the background were taken into another direction. The students started relating back the pattern to the Ottoman art and architecture, and also they came up with the color scheme that was seen from the scenery itself and how it changed throughout, let's say, the different phases of the movie. What I am teaching them here is not just how to analyze art pieces or Islamic art lines. I am teaching them to be long life learners and the ability to actually understand how things work on the background of an actor and how they can actually generate and understand lines that created all of these beautiful shapes and these beautiful interlaces. So the other question that we want to answer here, how feelings and context can actually inspire art messages and meanings. A lot of these series are about wars, romance, death, revenge, nature, and anger. And by viewing a series, I ask the students to kind of distill the feelings and reflect them back on art. So this is one of the samples of artwork that represented the episode Harim al-Sultan, and I'm giving here a very short brief, and maybe some of you from the audience have watched this episode. It gained popularity and it became trendy, I think in the past 2 years. And everyone came to know about the Ottoman Empire through this series. But in the background of this, there are small details that the students has focused on, and they tried to represent it in their art pieces. And they did not just think of it as colors or patterns, but how they can actually combine colors to patterns to accessories, as well as geometry in the center of all of this to spread a message. So in this art piece, the students, or here the artists, try to combine paintings with texture, in this case velvet. Velvet here was used in both red and black. Red to represent war and black to represent wealth. Also, the idea of understanding the pattern and redrawing it using your manual skills and digital skills was very important here, because the 3D printed gold piece that you can see in the middle taught the students how they can regenerate a pattern using their CAD skills and then actually model it to touch it and feel it through the 3D printed part. So this art is not 2D in nature. It's actually have some sort of a volume into it, some sort of a texture that would give a lot of feelings to the person viewing this space. Another example took the series Harun al-Rashid, which represents the big brother Harun al-Rashid and his younger brother al-Hadi. And through their presentation or art reflection, the students tried to mimic or to symbolize the two characters by shapes of circles intersecting in terms of materials, but a bit apart because of all the conflicts they have. What again brings them together in their own, on the artist's opinion, is this blue line that represents the mother and the silver color that represent the main character or the owner of the throne. The students said that, again, this is some testimonials from the students, said that they believe that a lot of this exercise, it employed the sense of sight and hearing, which led to the stabilization of information, and it made it even stronger for them to understand the meaning, to understand a bit of history about this culture and this pattern. that I am teaching in Islamic ornamentation course. So it was fun to watch, but when you watch it again with these ideas in mind, it becomes much, much deeper and much, much stronger. These are the color, I would say, sectors, and how each part of the art piece is reflecting the notion of either worlds, power, luxury, and also justice and balance, as you can see, and the symmetry used within the space, which is one of the Islamic principles that they have symbolized in their artwork. Another good example is from another series called At-Tariq. And in this, there was the conquest of Indonesia. And you can see in this how the artist tried to mimic the life of the scene by giving different colors to the art piece, putting the call for prayer or the dome of the masjid as the unifying element in the object, with the 3D printed pattern in blue to tell that all of them would brought back together using Salah or the mosque as a way to, you know, bring them unified again after all the wars. Another art piece by the same group also sent a meaningful message using the combination of shapes, patterns, and color scheme to represent how life after war can happen and how can life re-flourish after the Indonesian conquest. How the feelings again were thought. All these details in the story are very important, not only in focusing on the history part, but also on the artistic point of view. The 3D printed part here added a substance, the fabrication of it also kind of added a focal point to the art. And also using this new technology, the students were capable of understanding how the art piece or the Islamic art shape is created, how can it be developed, improved, modernized, and then printed in order to be able to touch it using their manual hands to feel the form and also to, you know, interact with it on a very closer scale. So the notion of the digital artisan here and his tool are very important. We started by the sketching and drawing and analysis phase, which is very normal for an art or design students. Then you go into another layer of coloring, drawing, and imagination, where you bring all this basic knowledge into the imaginative, I would say, level. But to become a digital artisan, you have to bring them into CAD skills, and you have to maybe even have the ability to bring them to these art pieces to life using 3D printing. That would give another dimension to the artwork, especially when we cannot take them to Tetuan and book them a ticket to be, you know, taught these amazing skills. Sometimes we start by giving them the 2D form, but I believe that the 2D form is not enough. The beauty of Islamic art and geometry goes beyond its flat nature. For me, I see it in its third dimension. It's a very complex, algorithmic, mathematical nature is amazing to contemplate, and with both skills and emotions, our digital artisans can really change the 21st century. So why this is important and how we can relate Islamic art within the 21st century, by embracing the thinking hand that Dr. Tamadher have highlighted. The thinking hand here is very important, but sometimes we need to use some digital tools when our hands and tools or regular tools are not available. We need to have a continuous reflection and a long life learning for visual designers, especially about Islamic art. And that's why I think series and filmmaking about Islamic art can really enrich the experience. And whenever these students are watching these series, they would subconsciously think of the patterns and the way they can reflect on it. The need for digital artisan, of course, is very important to spread Islam, and in its both 2D forms and 3D forms. Also, geometry needs to go beyond the canvas into real physical forms of micro and macro scale, as I will be showing in the coming slides. and also the new norms of interior and exterior spaces that we can create inspired from this simple exercise is really endless, especially when you have the ability to think, immerse, learn about these geometries and remodel them in a way to make you great designer. And from a micro scale, understanding these forms and these scenes can go from jewelry design to fashion design. Let's say this fashion scarf that was inspired by Mashrabiyah, by one of my students last semester, to macro scale, interior scale spaces that really brings these patterns with its function in ensuring privacy, or into an architectural scale, again another macro scale, to spread the beauty of these patterns into different shapes. In conclusion, this observation and the students' work really, for me, was a successful experience to maximize their comprehension of how design issues can shape spaces and products. The film can be taken as a tool to explore, connect, and reflect on values and mediums of currently designed objects, and displayed in a simple artwork that intertwining art pieces between Islamic art, technology, and traditional context. And then in my last 3 minutes, I'll say, find the digital artisan in you and spread Islam through your tools. Back at you, Mrs. Layla.
Thank you, Dr. Nihal, very much. It was a very interesting presentation, seeing the Islamic ornamentation from a different angle and different perspective as well. So thank you very much. Now we will move, and we have last but not least our presenter, Dr. Hawra AlShaikh. Dr. Hawra is an assistant professor at the Department of Architecture and Interior Design, University of Bahrain. She is a PhD holder, graduate from Canterbury School of Architecture, University for the Creative Arts, UK. She holds a BSc in Interior Design from the University of Bahrain. In 2012, she was awarded a master's degree in design from the University for the Creative Arts, Rochester. Her work explores interdisciplinary intersections between architecture, philosophy, psychology, and cultural theory. Dr. Hawra's research area mainly focuses on considering the immaterial aspects of the user's spatial experience in a user-oriented architectural practice. She is also interested in research that discusses the relationship between architecture as a creative process and the lived experience of people as a way of consuming space as a product of the design process and the context in which architecture exists. Dr. Hawra, your time.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Layla, for this brief. Thank you. I would like to share my screen now, so please just confirm if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can. If you can enlarge slides, please.
Yeah, I just did. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much again, Mrs. Layla, and welcome all to this presentation. I'm very happy to be participating in this symposium with my paper titled Islamic Architecture and Globalization, the Challenge of Coexisting. So let's get started. Islamic architecture has been always informed by religious and cultural values, both considering both the material functions and the immaterial aspects. So when I say material, it's more about the physicality of the architecture. It's more about the things that we can touch, the things that we can measure. And immateriality is the contrary, which is more about the values, the meanings, and sometimes feelings. However, the economic and social transformation that the world in general has seen over the last few decades has impacted on people and their relationship with their everyday spaces, the indoor and the outdoor, the city, its design, and the way it's experienced. So Islamic architecture includes sets of architectural and spatial features that is inherently influenced by Islam as a religion, cultural phenomena, and way of addressing life, exactly how Dr. Tamadher elaborated. However, Islamic architecture today certainly differs from how it used to be centuries ago. The old Islamic architecture during the period of Islamic civilization could be defined as an architecture that was founded by Muslims, most probably for Muslims, and in an Islamic country or in places where Muslims have an opportunity to express their cultural independence in architecture. Nowadays, the term Islamic architecture refers to a contemporary architecture that is inspired and influenced by full adherence to the norms and the values of Islam and the features of the old Islamic architecture, whether it is founded by Muslims or not, or built in an Islamic country or not. So Islamic practice in the Islamic world nowadays is influenced by Western architects and architecture. We have to accept that. Reminiscent of the imperial and economical interests that were operating during the colonial period. Some of the thinkers argue that this could be considered as maintaining the colonizing bonds between the colonizer and the colonized. In some cases, Islamic architecture is overlooked and considered to be as traditional style from the past, which does not necessarily fit into contemporary life conditions. Most of the architectural elements in the Islamic world became unnecessary, like the courtyard, for instance, the wind tower, the mashrabiyah. These elements, which embodied cultural and social as well as environmental specificities, had been replaced with sealed, air-conditioned spaces. So the whole cultural identity of the Islamic vernacular architecture had been changed and could not resist basically the massive change in lifestyle that accompanied the extensive wealth, especially in the Arabian part of the Islamic world right after the oil boom. It seems that the new socio-cultural needs created newly acquired tastes, even within the very conservative societies like those of the Gulf region. Thus, the result is an environment that is surrounded by competing ideologies between the preservation of Islamic architectural heritage, which only appears to take a visual recognition, unfortunately, on one hand, and the demand for contemporary global architecture on the other. So after this quite generic introduction, one could question, what is globalization? According to a number of authors, the term mainly refers to the spread of ideas, customs, institutions, and attitudes throughout the globe. However, these elements are originated in one part of the world. So if we are focusing well, it is mainly originated in the West. There are some regions around the world that are less open to globalization, or we might call it westernization, as some intellectuals argue, where nationalism dominates the evolution of culture and society. However, in the context of the Middle East, the culture, behaviors, beliefs, traditional society is heavily challenged by the spread of westernization, which poses major threat to tradition. One of the main problems is in considering religion as tradition, which then may mean that the religion itself conflicts with globalization or westernization or modernization. As a result of globalization, most of the residential and commercial quarters around the world tend to look similar and deprive the population of their identity. This has devastated the Islamic environments, especially as they are keen to imitate the Western model. Accordingly, the Islamic nation is also going through its own cultural crisis and the lack of culture, according to some thinkers like Nasr. This matter is simultaneously mirrored, transposed, and reflected in architecture as the value of actions of its civilization and people changes. Religion and culture were once considered as one in the Islamic world. Hence, acknowledging that there is a cultural crisis leads one to wonder and question if there is actually a religious crisis as well. Nonetheless, again, cities around the world nowadays are becoming shapeless entities with a haunting sameness, trying to emerge as new centers of global economy and finance. This assumes the need of powerful elements that would convert cities into marked products to attract headquarters and international companies and events, which is actually what's happening in the Gulf cities. The new trend is to establish entertainment amenities and urban projects that will encourage global activities, investments, and tourism. Therefore, architecture has been used as an instrument to generate eye-catching impression, which do not always lead to happiness of the city. This change on cities' spatial experience and structure in the Middle East context based on the new culture and the new lifestyle has led to new type of architecture and urbanism, which has changed the people's sense of space. The existence of people's Islamic architecture or Arab Islamic identity in this region is challenged by the current circumstances, especially since the Arabs are not effectively contributing to the progress of science, literature, and art activities. Rather, they act as recipients, consumers, and proponents of the Western ideologies. The question to be asked in this era of globalization is, how is it possible to approach the practice of architecture with better awareness of its relationship with culture? Perceiving architecture as a formal, spatial, and cultural mechanism gives the opportunity to explore greater potential of rich meanings, which then leads to architecture that respects social and cultural nuance. According to a number of thinkers who argue that the new urban planning of cities lack human dimensions within it, in which the basic interaction, exchanges, and communication between people and the city components is missing. Importing the Western model of urban planning to the Middle East could be compared to planting seeds in the wrong soil, according to some thinkers. The model in the West has been governed by certain political, economical, and most importantly, social and cultural systems which might work there, but not necessarily in the Gulf region. The specificity of this context comes from the well-established urban planning that existed more than 1,000 years ago, and it worked well with people. Islamic architecture and urban planning used to be dominant in the area. However, along with globalization and modernity, everything has changed. The old way and the lifestyle has been replaced with the new ones. So the question here is, again, is there a way of generating a new solution that would respect the specificity of the context and at the same time go well with the needs of the contemporary way of life? The ideal situation would be that society maintains its existing and traditional cultures and find a way to blend with the new and foreign ideas in order to establish a stronger mixture. The society should be selective in terms of what to choose, accept, and reject, especially when dealing with values of tradition and religion. This would mean that globalization is welcomed as long as it does not destroy the local society and tradition. Rather, it should contribute in keeping it alive and encouraging it in a new way. Today's society's aspirations are different to what they used to be 30 years ago. And local people, including clients, designers, and decision makers, are not necessarily concerned with implementing traditional design solutions. However, there must be a niche for traditional ideas that are still valuable to today's culture. Or based on this, there is a need for raising greater awareness of the importance of maintaining the relationship between culture and architecture, which in fact does not conflict with any type of progression or progress. Such a relationship may encourage architects, decision makers, and people to come up with genuine ideas that reassure the specificity of this context, which in fact needs specific architecture. That's the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Mrs. Leila, back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hawra. It was really a very interesting and inspiring presentation. However, we had actually 4 very interesting presentations that really raises some questions related to Islamic architecture. So I would like now to basically open the floor for some questions and answers. So I already have some questions in the on the side written. I will just start first with some comments from the beginning. It was a comment to Mrs. Ayesha that the presentation was very interesting, and Mrs. Hajar said that I really like the Sufi idea for the hand of God. Also for Dr. Tamadher, there was a comment about the presentation, and then there is a question. I don't know who will answer this question. Is art Islamic because it belongs to the religion, or because it is an Islamic region? Who would like to answer this question? Tamadher.
Yeah, actually, this is an ever-going question, to be honest. It's always this constant questioning whether is it Islamic because a Muslim made it, or is it Islamic because it's addressing Islamic Muslim audience? The answer is, for me, I feel it's still being answered. It's still being developed. It's still being informed. What I would say, if you would ask me what makes it Islamic, if it actually corresponds to the religious values, to the values of the faith, for me, and even in my classes, I would say that I don't have to put geometry and I don't have to put calligraphy in order to make a space Islamic. If it's Islamic in its essence, if it's Islamic in its values that portrays, or through the function that it cultivates. So this is a very short answer for me, and I would leave the floor for my other colleagues to maybe have a different view.
Yes. Anyone else would like to complement to this answer?
Okay.
Ayesha, you? Yes?
Yeah. Thank you very much. The question is very interesting, and the answer from Dr. Tamadher is also very interesting. But as Dr. Tamadher mentioned, it's actually it's being explored. That how do you think? So what I feel that if you're having as a belief that because of what we believe as an artist, that each design is actually based on some concept or some theme. So if we consider that as a conceptual approach, and if you're having, for example, Islamic doctrine, I'm using a big word, as your conceptual approach. So of course it is Islamic representation of its values in art. That is what I feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayesha. Anybody else would like to comment? Or shall we move to the next question? Actually, Dr. Nihal, you already wrote an answer here, but maybe for the rest of the listeners, you can also briefly answer. The question was, how can Islamic art be incorporated in our modern homes?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Leila, and thank you for the person who asked this question. It is definitely a very important question, and I gave a lecture earlier last month about this, about the ways and the guidelines of how we can implement these beliefs, I would say, and also these ways of thought and lines in our homes. We can start from as early on as the planning stage when we are designing our plan. How can we ensure privacy? How we can ensure upward orientation and the connection between the courtyard, the interior courtyard and God, as well as between the interior courtyard and the rest of the house to have an inward orientation. Then we can go to a later stage of the interior analysis details that can be somewhere in between the partition designs, the window treatments like mashrabiyas, but it's not just us using the pattern. It is us understanding why these patterns developed, from what country or what styles, and what are the messages and patterns, intersections with identity that we want to show. It's not just copying and pasting the pattern, it's understanding the user, the person who's living in the space, his own beliefs, and whether this space would actually be Islamic enough for him. There are different modern languages of reinterpreting Islamic patterns through paintings, through the finest details within the accessories we use, to the patterns that we put on the cushions we choose for our sofas. So I would say, yeah, we need another lecture for that.
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
I would like to move to a next question. I do believe this is Dr. Nihal again for you. It's actually coming from Dr. Fatma Kayed. And her question, that probably listening to your presentation, she said, it made me question how the Islamic art impacted the storytelling of the interior space in the series. We don't hear you, Dr. Nihal. Is your mic muted?
Yes, it was. Thank you for reminding me. Thank you, Dr. Fatma, for raising this question. And I think my answer to this is watch another series again as an exercise and reconsider the story from a director point of view and a character point of view and a viewer point of view. And you would see that every time you watch it from a different perspective, you will have a different meaning and the story will be told in a totally different way. So I would say this sort of a mental exercise, us watching series again and again would tell us different stories every time we watch it. But it's very important that we link this story to its historical background and see how the interior space would actually emphasizing this historical setting or historical, let's say, problem that happened in the movie, and how every single element was used either to express anger by throwing a vase, or by showing the seatings where all the harems were sitting and having this chatty dialogue. So really the interior space was designed to reflect the original historical setting, but also to embrace the story that is being told by the director and characters. I hope this answers Dr. Fadil.
If I may, Mrs. Leila, I want to follow up regarding that, because I also wanted to, add to that, or maybe question that with Dr. Nihal. Can I?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so actually this is also in line with what Dr. Fatma Qaid is actually questioning, and it's very interesting. Like you were talking about how cinema inspired art, and how actually design students kind of practice observation in terms to extract some of these elements that they seen in the cinematic views or cinematic scene. But I was actually thinking, can it be in reverse? Can we designers actually influence the way that Islam is being portrayed in cinemas and in movies and so on? It's just a question out in the world, maybe for all of us to think about. And it also made me remember one of the things that I had during my master's studies, is that our instructor actually had us watch Blade Runner, which is a very old movie. It's one of the classic. It's not the remake of it, which happened maybe last year. It's the old one. And she actually wanted us to see how the designer of the scene, or the stage designer actually, or the set designer actually predicted the way things look in the future. Because if you know Blade Runner, it's all set in the future. So for them to predict how the future look architecturally, they had to look into the past. And they actually looked into the work of Frank Lloyd Wright and Mies van der Rohe in order to imagine what could it be in the many years in the future. So I'm just like putting it here in context and see, are we actually cultivating as educators a sense of a culture of envisioning what could happen in a few years' time, and what could happen in the scene architecturally and design-wise or art-wise in the Islamic world. So I don't know if you might want to comment on that, or maybe not, I don't know.
I totally agree, Dr. Tamadher. Dr. Tamadher, I think we can actually shape the futures through the competition you started about mosque architecture. You are envisioning the mosque of the future. Through the use of another research I'm working on is through the use of virtual reality, we can bring these missed worships, especially during the pandemics. We can design the future of mosques, interiors of spaces with minimum amount of cost. The idea here is how we can, translate these hidden messages that we want to spread through Islamic art through the tools that we can have best, and in a very accessible manner, and perhaps cheaper than actually starting block works and constructions. And
this also feeds into what Mrs. Ayesha was saying about symbolism and architecture. Are we looking into new notions of symbolism? Do we actually need to symbolize old thoughts, or do we have also new notions, contemporary things that we do as people or as Muslims who are living in today? Do we have something to symbolize, or do we have new metaphors that we can represent in architecture? And again, the role of us as educators in facilitating that, maybe.
I think, Dr. Tamadher, that's another PhD, but going through the presentations from the ones that Dr. Ms. Ayesha presented to the one Dr. Hawra showed, really the context plays a major role, and we have new norms and new beliefs, and I'd say we articulate them differently. As educators, we really have a major role, and I think Ms. Hajar was asking, how can you really transfer this to students? Through certain projects, through certain courses the ideas here are always questionable. There is no concrete answer. There is no correct or wrong answer. There is always the questions of what can be right and what can be wrong. And I think just by raising these questions, you're fulfilling certain objectives. You're eliminating minds and teaching them that this can actually be taken forward. I'll stop here so that I will not take others' time.
There is a question asking about possibility to create a course for architecture and interior design about art history, for instance. So they said this will be really helpful. So anybody would like to answer?
I think Mrs. Leila, you can answer that because you also teach it as well as me.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Actually, I do believe. I mean, I know for sure in architecture, and I do believe interior design as well. Maybe we do not have the course called History of Art as such. Although I have to say, when I was a student, we used to have really a course of history of art, and it was a very comprehensive and a very detailed course. However, we always address art in our courses. It is something which we cannot separate really. I mean, we cannot separate architecture from art. It is always working together, cooperating together. And it's not just in Islamic architecture. It goes historically back as well, where we could see, you know, how the architectural elements were always closely related to art. Where even when you have, let's say, in a 12th century, we used to have a sculpture, that sculpture will be framed within the arch and within the column. So there was always that very close relationship. And in Islamic architecture, this is really something which is very extensive. There is almost no surface where, or architectural surface, if we can label it like that, that is not without any ornamentation, with decoration, with the geometry, the floral patterns. And I mean, it goes on and on and on. So, I mean, maybe we don't teach it through the course labor like this, but definitely this is something that we cannot separate from any architectural language, and I do believe this is even much more expressed through the Islamic architecture. So we do teach and address the history of art through our courses, that's for sure. So I don't know if anybody would like to add something.
I think we're fine, Ms. Leila. We have two questions to Dr. Hawra in the Q&A.
Okay. Yes, I can see one. Dr. Hawra, how Islamic architecture is different around the world, as in Arab countries and Spain, for example?
Okay, so basically Islamic architecture has been very much influenced by the local context. So whenever that it is spread over new kind of context, it will be very much merged with the local architecture, the local civilization. So that's why you will feel that there are certain kind of guidelines overall the Islamic architecture from the west to the east, but there will be kind of distinguished characteristics upon the locality of the context itself, like what's going on in Spain, for example, or in Syria or Morocco. So it is very much, or Persia as well. So it is very much influenced by whatever has been actually going on in the country or the context or the geographical spot before Islam arrives. So that's why you will see a sense of variety, although it will be kind of governed with the same teachings because it's coming out of the religion itself. I hope that I'm answering the question well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hawra. There is one more question as well. Do you think modernizing the old homes is the right way of doing it?
I think the right way of doing it starts from raising greater awareness. We need to talk to people. We need to make sure that we all need to
be aware that we are losing a lot if we are letting our heritage, our tradition, our own cultural identities get away or demolished or replaced by something else. This would be the first step. After that, we need to think creatively into how we can accept the progress that's coming from the West or coming from another kind of context and blend it in a new way to create that unique mixture. Yes, homes would be the right thing to start with as well, since it is associated with the everyday life, with the people themselves. So if we are raising their awareness, they will be with starting with their own spaces first. So that would be a good starting point, actually.
Sorry, Dr. Hawra, I think you have one more question as well. Do you think that we can add more to design to counter globalization?
Again, I would answer with the same as the previous question. We need to start with raising greater awareness. And of course, yes, design plays a vital role as it is a machine that represents people's ideologies, reflects their own kind of beliefs, cultural values, their own practice, and it shows their interaction with their environments. So yes, I would say.
Thank you very much. Dr. Nihal, you are following with me as well the questions. Did we cover everything or there are more questions?
Dr. Sausan wanted to ask a question. I'm not sure if she can open her mic, so I asked her to type it instead.
Yeah, she's just asking, can I ask?
Yes. Yeah, she cannot. You cannot ask Dr. Sausan by the mic. Unfortunately, that's an option only for speakers. So she will need to type in her question.
So can you type? Yeah, while we are waiting for Dr. Sausan to type the question, maybe I have a question for Ayesha as well, if I may, because
Yes,
you were talking, Ayesha, about the symbolism and geometrism and intangible aspects of Islamic ideas, and I want just to because we are all aware about the richness of the Islamic decoration. Islamic architecture is full of symbolism and geometrism and so on. But do you think that today in this contemporary time, if we compare, for instance, with the mosque that are eventually built in a Western world, and then compare them with the mosques that are located in a kind of a different part of the world, do you feel that that richness is kind of minimized when it comes to the mosque where maybe it is located somewhere in Europe or in other part of the world? Does it still, in your opinion, does it still reflect that richness in decoration? Or there is a certain minimalistic approach to that, depending on the location?
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Ella. With reference to your point that if we are having this in different contexts, the mosque design, what I feel that there are 2 points. First point is that what is your conceptual belief to design that? I'm not talking about the ornamentation part. For example, I heard once, I think it is very interesting to share here, that wherever you have the mosque, whether it is European countries or Eastern or Western, if when you sit in the posture of the tashahhud in your prayer, sorry, maybe my Arabic pronunciation is not proper, but you can correct me, and when you start reciting at-tahiyyat, so the way when you keep your hand like that and then you put your shahada finger, so actually I heard that this is the way when you feel this is the prayer hall, and this is called feel like a minara. This is how when you're just symbolizing it. But when you're saying that how to emphasize the beauty as we are having architectural or Islamic ornamentation, I feel this is overlapping of the atmosphere, in the atmosphere that you are replicating the idea that what are Islamic pattern and how you are beautifying the surface treatment. That is when we're talking about the patterns. But the inside mosque feeling, even if it is in different contexts, I believe that that depends on the quality of light, that depends on the quality of spaciousness. Again, as I mentioned, that there are different thresholds, that how you are taking someone from the exterior world to the another world. So I feel that, it really depends on the conceptual approach. I know it is a very tricky question and maybe I'm not giving you a very direct answer.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ayesha. Anyways, there will be another series of lecture where I do believe maybe some of those questions and insight and examples will be seen, in the second series of lecture. So I do believe this topic will come and rise again, to be discussed. I do believe, and Dr. Nihal, help me. I think Dr. Sausan did not type the question.
I think he did. It was more about a comment. Dr. Sausan is saying that there is a need to problematize the notion of Islamic art to avoid the Orientalist stereotype of representing East as a monolithic entity. Yeah, that is, for me, if you could allow me to answer that, I quite agree with this. Also, what gets produced in movies and soap operas are extremely problematic. I didn't see that. Okay, suddenly I think
published, Tamadher, if you go to publish.
Oh, yeah, okay. So also what gets produced in movies and soap operas are extremely problematic and idealistic, and perceptions of the few who have the means and the power to decide what was the history and the art of the region. That is so true. Like, we have this problem in history that is kind of like a missing gap in documenting what was happening exactly. And I think this also refers to what Dr. Hawra was saying, the identity crisis and the cultural crisis. For me, I think as part of my research, I wanted to create a timeline. It is one of those maps that I was telling you about, is that I created a timeline that actually tracks the movements, the art and culture, or art and architecture movements, along with the documentation of history of Islamic art and how it relates chronologically with that, and education. So I have 3 timelines in my research that actually trying to compare what was happening throughout all of this. And it appears to me that there is a lack of documenting what was happening after the Ottoman Empire. And we have a lot of researchers who are actually trying to encourage or promote this idea of historization and putting things in context and going away from this idea of Orientalist, because it only happened when a group of Europeans came to document the architectural elements of North Africa and or the Middle East that we know today. So it was the result of a European trip or a European study rather than what was actually happening. It is a subject on its own, and it is a subject that we can definitely talk about in maybe another kind of session. But I think I would take this opportunity to maybe be the devil's advocate and point this out regarding the cultural crisis. I think I was in the same line with what Dr. Hawra was talking about cultural identity and the loss of identity, and how we at some point of time we actually wanted to verify our belonging to culture or kind of our roots. So we tried to kind of copy and paste what was happening in the past in order to hang on to our identity. And yes, I was in that kind of like question that I've reached to a conclusion that I have two schools of thoughts mainly. I have the traditionalists who, you know, glorifying the past and appreciating the sacred geometry and the sacred architecture and the traditional geometry, and believe that these ideals were lost now. And I have also the modernists, or the people who are into adapting new technologies, going out of the norm, coping up with globalization and coping up with what's happening all around the world. And after a long period of time, and after like meeting with Sayyid Hussein Nasser, after meeting with Nasser Rabat, I came to conclusion that why are we fighting, or why are we still fighting the idea that we were in a, or why are we still kind of like insisting on that time when we were in loss of identity? Why do we keep saying that we were lost and we were influenced by globalization? Why not embrace it as part of development that we went through and came out of it as any other people or any other culture and any other parts of the world where they were also influenced by globalization, and they also find their own unique voice aesthetically and creatively and so on. So I don't know, this is maybe a question for all of you, and maybe even some of the audience can maybe comment on that.
Thank you very much.
This is also
Mrs. Ayesha, you would like to comment?
Yeah, I think this is also explaining what you asked Mrs. Leila, because somehow that how Dr. Tamadher is explaining that it is just kind of a race, that are we really accepting our identity or want to acknowledge it, or we want to run with the globalization where everything is being in a change position, or we are into adaptation mode. So I think it is really an interesting topic, and it needs another conference for that.
Yes, for sure. Thank you very much. I do believe we are now reaching a time where we need to close this session. I would like to thank all the presenters for their interesting and exciting presentations. We started with the symbolism and intangible aspects of Islamic ideas. Then we were taken and we traveled to Morocco with Dr. Tamadher into the world of the craftsmanship over there. Dr. Nihal took us to the world of movies, which was another very interesting presentation. And then with Dr. Hawra, we ended in with the globalization, modernity, this constant dialogue between the culture and architecture, the cultural crisis, and something that definitely we cannot answer during this relatively short time. So at the end, I would like to again thank all the presenters and to the audience who joined us today. I hope that you all had enjoyable experience so far. Also, once again, I would like to thank the Department of Architecture and Interior Design, especially to Dr. Haifa, along with the Cultural Collaboration Committee for organizing this event. I wish you all a pleasant evening and hope to see you again in some other events during this week. Thank you very much and have a pleasant night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your questions.
Tamadher.